Since I didn't know Kent was gonna be here tonight, you see the date there, August 20th, that's about 2 miles from where you and I live, in Bear Valley. We got trail cameras up in that country now, and we got a resident pack that's surviving. So, the wolves are making it up there, but, I'm gonna tell you my story tonight about Montana, Idaho, Wyoming area. I'm not gonna get into Colorado. I don't know the country here. You all know it better than me. I'm going to talk about the evolution of wolf recovery. Everything that's happening up in our country predictably can happen here. From successful recovery and reintroductions to anti-wolf behaviors and a lot of, I call it up there retribution. When the feds were recovering wolves, we were in control, so to speak. We enforced the rules, made the rules, and did a lot to recover wolves. The states resented it from day one. Idaho, Montana, Wyoming didn't want any part of it. The state legislatures passed bills to forbid their fish and game agencies from participating. Western congressmen did their best back in DC to cut our funding so that it wouldn't happen. And now those states manage wolves. No such thing as manage, it's kill them. If you're not killing them, you don't need to manage them. They can manage very well themselves. So anyhow, let's move on. I'm the Forrest Gump of wolf recovery in the Northern Rockies. I was district supervisor of wildlife services in Montana before wolves were even in our vocabulary. And so I was working with, black bear, grizzly bear, mountain lions, coyotes, you name it. And then about mid-1980s was when the wolves started drifting down out of Canada and showing up in the area that was part of my responsibility. So I quickly had to become a wolf specialist, not by a plan necessarily, but by being in the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time. I've enjoyed thoroughly everything I've done my whole career, and wouldn't take back a day of it. It's been a wild adventure. And down here now, to add to my resume, I'm on the TWIG, Technical Working Group in Colorado. And remember any of them old boogers? I bet you all you're too young to remember them. But anyway, this is our team back in the day. There's Joe Fontaine, yours truly, Dr. Steve Fritz, Ed Bangs, Doug Smith when he was a little boy, and Mike Jimenez. And there's a whole lot more to the team, but this was kind of the core there, working out of Helena, and the people in charge of making the reintroduction happen, getting the EIS written, and moving forward. And couldn't think of a better bunch of people to work with. And I will say everybody there truly dedicated to recovering wolves. That's what it was about, and everybody gave it 1,000%. The older we are, the better we was. Tonight I'm just going to remind you all that it's about the wolves, in my opinion. It ain't about us, because there's going to be plenty about us later. So just want to remind you that, maybe repetitious to tell you all this. Wolves come in a lot of colors. We call them gray wolf, but they're black, they're white, they're peach colored, salt and pepper, you name it. There's probably a wolf out there that color. They communicate by scent marking, so they travel through the country, and this is how they communicate, find one another. And this, I believe, these scent trails, once they go across the state like Washington or Oregon, other wolves get on that trail because almost as soon as a wolf shows up, say in southwest Oregon, you got another one, and they probably just smell each other. 2 or 3 years old, sometimes younger, they head out, leave their pack. So again, this is misunderstanding a lot of times. The anti-wolf people say, well, if you get a pack of 2, they're going to be 6, they're going to be 12, there's going to be 18, there's going to be 26, and pretty quick there's 50 and 100, and it's no. The wolves are coming in, they're coming in as puppyhood, but as sub-adults and adults, they leave and follow those scent marks and communicate. We all know they howl, and this is just a pretty picture of a pair of wolves from Yellowstone. They dug in them cheek, got an airplane, and get a better picture than I do. So the core pack is their success. It's a very strong social group, and once there's a pair formation, they breed in February, 63-day gestation period when they have pups. And up in our country, 6 puppies is very, very common, most common. I hardly see any that vary too much from 6, although I've seen as high as 9. And another important thing to remember is pack territories are about 250 square miles in the Montana, Idaho, Wyoming area. So wolves just don't get thicker and thicker and thicker like coyotes, which can live in a 20, 25 square mile area. Wolves den. I've not shown all the pictures tonight, we haven't got time. They'll den in logs, they'll den under spruce trees. Ideally, a lot of them dig out an old badger excavation where they probably badger dug for a ground squirrel and the wolves just widened it and turned it into a den. They spend about 8 to 10 weeks in that den before the adults lead them out into rendezvous sites. So this is about that first 8 or 10 weeks, they may be underground and not see too far. Pack all works to feed the young. It isn't just mom and dad, so all the siblings, older wolves from previous litters, all join in and help haul food. And then eventually when they get to a rendezvous site, the perfect rendezvous site is a place where there's, you know the term riparian, wet zones, beaver ponds, tall grass, thick willow brush. That's where the wolves will take those pups and stash them, and it's about near impossible to ever know they're in there. They have a really good way of hiding. And back in the day when wolves first showed up, we used to spend weeks trying to count them. You sit on a hill with binoculars, and there's 2 out of them that now you put a trail camera up, put a little stink 'em out there, and go back 2 days later, and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, there's 3 black ones, 2 gray ones. Boom, it's done. Back in our day, it wasn't that easy, and our counts were never that good. This is my wife Jenny and I, and in my career, I've probably foothold trapped about 300 wolves and collared them. I've never killed a wolf in a trap my entire career. It's all for research or for control. Or in the early years, I helped relocate 117 wolves in the early days. Took them from a problem and put them somewhere else. And I'll show you a chart. By 2002, there were so many wolves in so many places that the higher-ups said, no more moving wolves. So that's when we started going lethal. Again, for Kent's interest, this is about 3 miles west of where you and I were looking for wolves. This is up in the Corduroy Meadows, Frank Church, not too far from where we camped. So again, all good.
We took wolves up to get them to howl, and Carter was going to be the guy that recorded the returning howl and could officially confirm it was a wolf. And as Carter were talking earlier, we heard every animal in that forest except the wolf.
We had a lot of beavers slapping their tails. Elk bugle. Yep. But yeah, we were a little ahead of our day, but they're there now. Okay, and so, of course, another myth you hear constantly up in our country, it's kind of like the election was stolen. I call them mega Canuck wolves, are these giant, bloodthirsty, 150 to 200 pound killers that we brought down, wrong subspecies, yada, yada, yada. But the average wolf up there, even after the wolf reintroduction from Canada, an average wolf's about 100 pounds. You get some big males that with an empty stomach, 120, 125 pounds. I've seen lactating females as small as 65 pounds. But again, a wolf is a wolf is a wolf. You all know that. And after measuring hundreds of them, they stand about 32 inches at the shoulder, and part of that's fur. And make their living off these gigantic snowshoe feet of theirs. It helps them travel the country and hunt and run on top of snow, and essential to their survival. Another fact is all the research shows that wolf packs, very social units, everybody has a job to do, and every member of the pack is essential. Puppies, for a while, they sit in the peanut gallery and don't contribute a lot, but they're learning and watching. And puppies need adults to teach them everything. It's important to scientists, and the research has demonstrated the facts here. The fleeter females, the slower moving males, all working together, but throw that all out the window, and I'll talk about it over and over tonight about our wolf management up there. It's called, not management, killing. Nobody cares about the social structure of wolves, except us. So I'm going to quick show you, try and go through this really fast. Wolves, since about 1940s, they were eradicated. They were pretty much extinct in these states I'm talking about, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, the whole Pacific Northwest. And yet people would argue, well, I saw a wolf in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. And yet they criticize us for bringing wolves from Canada down. They call them Canadian wolves, I call them wolves from Canada. But that's what all these wolves they were seeing are. Since 1940s, anytime you seen a wolf, it was a wolf from Canada coming down and almost always died of lead poisoning or actual poisoning of some sort. So I just want to point out that 1995, 1996, 66 wolves were brought down from Canada, 35 to Idaho, 31 to Yellowstone. I was on the capture team, got to go up and do this work, and notice once we got them through the gauntlet, we brought enough of them down that they could find each other. They were there ahead of the human killing aspect, and notice how quickly successful they were. And the populations took off. The yellow is Idaho, red is Greater Yellowstone, and then at the same time, Northwest Montana finally got a grip too, where the naturally recolonizing wolves took off. It took us till 2002 to meet recovery levels, 300 wolves, 30 breeding pairs, 300 wolves equitably distributed throughout the 3 recovery areas of Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. And then the lawsuits started, more than you could ever count, trying to delist them, relist them. By 2011, through a rider bill, Idaho and Montana were delisted with no judicial review. That's our catch-22 up there now. As angry as wolf management is, I don't know how to stop it or how to change the direction of it. And the party, I'm not going to name the party, but the parties who run these 3 states of Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, they are not wolf friendly. And they don't care about science, they don't care about social aspect of wolves. They don't care if they call the herds of elk, they don't care what things they can do positively. All they say is there's too many of them, and here's my latest numbers where we stand today. There's only supposed to be 300 of them. That's what they want, 300 in 30 breeding pairs. We got 200 breeding pairs. So you can see why they're letting, in Idaho, you can kill as many wolves as you want. There's no limit. You can kill 200, 300, 400, 500, as long as you got a tag and you're legal. Luckily, our country is up and it's down and it's steep and it's forested. And humans are a lazy species. Let me repeat that. Humans are a lazy species. So because of that, wolves continue to prevail in spite of all of the killing that is attempted to reduce their numbers. And it's kind of like a shotgun blast on a target. You can see Yellowstone area, central Idaho, where they were reintroduced, and then showing up here in these northeast corner of Washington, northeast Oregon. And I'm not even going into California, but you got a good dozen or more in California. So they're, and one of my books there, I read about a wolf that I collared north of Boise that went over, had puppies up in the Eagle Cap Wilderness, right in here, and turned out to be OR7, who went down here to Oregon, started the road pack way down by Medford, and now wolves from that pack helping recolonize California. So you can see the connectivity, how these wolves travel. Okay, and so where do wolves rate compared to, wolves seem to be the #1 heartburn for everyone, of what a wolf's doing, what it's killing. It's either eating livestock or it's killing an elk that I was going to shoot. But when you look at cause of livestock death, I mean, start up here, respiratory problems, calving problems, digestive. Way up here is coyotes. They're probably the #1 problem, followed by domestic dogs.
Yeah.
And then you come on down, there's the dogs way down here. You keep coming down, whoop, mountain lions. Whoop, there's a wolf, way down here with the bears, next to the lynxes and the bobcat. So I mean, wolves are no big deal, but people make them a huge monumental deal. Again, I did some cutting and pasting, but just to give you the general, this is a dynamic system of livestock loss. It can vary from year to year, all depends if the sheep people have a good summer or if they run 150 head over a cliff and they pile up. And suddenly wolves killed 150 sheep and they didn't even lay a tooth on them. So you can see how variable the livestock losses can be. But primarily sheep and cattle are targeted, and then the dogs, a lot of these dogs that get killed are working dogs, guard dogs, herding dog, and hounds that are chasing mountain lions and bears. Here's the way it is in Idaho. I was trying to get the numbers for this talk. Wildlife Services told my contact, if you want to know, FOIA us. I don't even know what they're killing in Idaho, and they're not telling us. So, as the state director said, maybe I'm not as nice a guy as some of the other guys were. But otherwise, the best of my ability, here's sort of the most recent losses of 2021. And again, you can see numbers are not all that great. But again, I'm not going to understate that, when a cow or a sheep belongs to a livestock producer, it's valuable to them. And certainly, we've responded by killing thousands of wolves in response to sheep and cattle predation events. And just so you again understand, out of these losses that are happening annually, we got roughly 6 million cattle with their calves. Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and the other western states are very much the same. And wolf kills in northern Rocky Mountain region. A friend of mine, Norm Bishop, who puts out a lot of information out of Yellowstone, says roughly 1 in 10,000 cattle, 3 in 10,000 sheep are killed by wolves. Seasonally, I'm not going to say either the wolves cannot be a problem. Wolves do kill livestock, and wolves love to eat elk. That's what they survive on. Seasonally, the biggest problem with livestock is in August, September, where you got wolf pups growing up, they're hungry, they need food, and mom and dad are going to feed them. And if they can find slow-moving livestock, better yet, unattended livestock that aren't being watched, livestock that are, a lot of them are up on public land at that time, not checked very frequently. So the wolves will focus on vulnerable livestock, and it kind of picks up momentum into the fall. By September, the livestock have to be removed from the public land because of hunting seasons and other conflicts that are going to happen. Otherwise, in a elk-dominated environment, that's what the wolves will eat. You all know Dougie. And they do eat 16 to 22 elk-sized animals. But don't forget, they eat gut tiles, and they eat ground squirrels, and they opportunistically eat any carrion, other sources of food and protein. So they're not just living specifically day to day trying to kill an elk. Okay, elk numbers. I hear it all the time. I've been called a liar. I've been called everything up until fairly recently. The wolves are wiping out the elk. That's all you hear about. And my son calls me from London. You ought to hear them up here. Everybody in the sporting goods store. Oh, they get an elk again this year, them damn wolves. 26 years ago, Idaho probably had 90,000 elk, 100,000. We're up to 140,000. Montana, back when we did the wolf reintroduction, they probably had 110,000, 170,000. Elk numbers have increased everywhere in these states. Now, what you're going to hear about is the local elk herd in the local community area of such and such forest in the Idaho Panhandle. But that's the exception. It's not the rule. And Wyoming manages for 92,000 elk. If you look at their management objectives in the state of Wyoming, that's really all they would be comfortable with. And yet they've got 120,000 elk. So pure bogus, fake news, whatever you want to call it. But everybody believes it, and it's really a good excuse to come home with nothing. Here's the elk harvest data for Idaho, just so you can see. There's the line. They're above harvest levels too on a 10-year trend. No shortage of elk in Idaho. So, and here's from some of my colleagues. Dr. Dave Osband, Idaho Wolf Project, University of Idaho, he and I talk. He's one of my main sources of good information, valid information. But you got to understand up northern Idaho right now, well, let's talk about the state. Private land, wolf hunting, trapping year-round. You can use laser sights, infrared. You can run them down in the winter on snowmobiles and club them to death. You can use long-range rifles. There's just about nothing you can't do to kill a wolf. You can pull puppies out of their dens in Idaho and bounty them. They can be a day old. If you got 6 tags for 6 dead puppies, you're entitled to the $2,000 bounty. And I know last year of a case where that happened, and there's I think more cases than that, but that one came to light. So we're killing lactating females, we're killing puppies, we're killing everything they can kill to get these numbers down, and that's what's happening. But anyway, Dave, this year, this is his quote to me, and I said, "You care if I use it?" He said, "I don't care, Carter, it's a fact." But here with this equipment and all these people, after 15 years of study, this year they found 6 packs across 3 study areas. They're hammering them up in that panhandle country. And here's a fellow, retired law enforcement guy that we've never met, but we're on Facebook together. He's retired law enforcement and also still contracting as a Forest Service archaeologist. 40, I think they were in 45 days in the Frank. He and his wife go in with their dogs and do archaeological tracks, camp in a different place every night, 15, 16 days at a time. Just briefly summarize, he says, we don't see tracks, we don't hear wolves, we see little evidence of them. And so remember that when the speaker was just down there, some of you may have just heard her speak. But anyway, I was trying to track this down and I got it like day before yesterday. But this is the director of the Idaho Fish and Game talking to her, and we discussed the challenges of coexistence, and he asked me, why isn't Yellowstone good enough for you people who want to recover wolves? Why can't you leave working lands alone? That's the attitude in our country. And again, I'm telling you all this because people are people, People in Colorado, you're gonna deal with the same pushback, the same attitude, the same resistance, so be prepared for it. You're not immune from this kind of thinking. But to me, it's just unbelievable that a fish and game director talks in those terms. And I want to show you the bounties caught on up here. There's a group, you can look them up on Facebook, Foundation for Wildlife Management. They have nothing to do with wildlife management. These are a bunch of fuzzy bearded trappers. And they've got the Idaho Fish and Game Commission wrapped around their little finger. And that's the politics and the environment we're in right now. So the bounty thing really was going strong up here, but now they found a new way. The more people that complain about wolves down further south and central, now they're changing the amount of the bounties they pay to bring wolf killers down from these areas. You don't want to go down there and catch a cheap $1,500 one when you come down. So they're bringing them down into our country to kill these local packs in our area. And like these pictures I've been showing you, the wolves that I've been getting pictures of, there's fewer and fewer wolves in that area every year. And I used to watch 2 packs, camp with them every year. One of them packs now is blanked out, and the other pack is down to 6. So they're eating away at them. And when I showed you those population figures, that's what the Fish and Game agencies say there are. Now, are there that many? Who's counting them? They're not collaring wolves anymore for research, but they're collaring them to mark the packs to go back in and kill them from the air with aircraft. So Idaho wolves killed, here's just a partial list. And it's really hard to get these numbers. We've got friends who are getting spreadsheets through state records requests and trying to get the count, but you get the idea. In 2020, 2021, about 570 wolves killed. They're out to get them. Oh, and 35 pups. So pups aren't sacred either. They're just wolves. And here's a little bit of verbose about the rates of killing in each of the states. Idaho, Montana. Montana, I'm surprised. I lived there 26 years, and now under the new governor, they pulled all the stops. I'd say Montana's trying to get as bad as Idaho in wolf management, and they're well on their way. And last year, I think the governor signed a bill to allow the bounty system now to spread into Montana and be paid. The only folks that are under the pressure is the state of Wyoming. They have about 350 wolves roughly down there, so they can't just go hog wild killing wolves in Wyoming like Idaho, Montana, because Wyoming actually could run the risk of going below 150 wolves and 15 breeding packs and bring relisting back, and they certainly don't want the feds back in their life any longer. So in 2020, roughly, I added up in our 3 states over 1,000 dead wolves. And a lot of people focus, well, Wildlife Services is the enemy. Well, Wildlife Services kill a fraction of the wolves, like down here, 30 wolves by hunters, 32. That's not all that many wolves for Wyoming killed by Wildlife Services. The hunters and trappers are the ones that are really chalking up the numbers. So we talk about coexistence. A lot of rural folks, I think that's almost a profane word to them, because when you talk about coexistence, there's almost like, don't use that word with me, because it almost sounds like we have to live with them. Well, when you think about it, we got an estimated 3,000 wolves living in Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. A fraction of those wolves ever kill livestock, so you already are coexisting with them. So sometimes it's the elephant in the room. If you just don't talk about it, don't bring it out in the open, people are living with wolves, and a lot of progressive ranchers are recognizing that you're not going to shoot your way out of this problem. You're not going to shoot and trap wolves out to somehow remove them in time. Well, I guess we can. If we bring out the napalm and the poison and all these other methods. But nonetheless, and I don't want to paint any occupation with a big brush. Bless the hearts of the sheepmen and cattlemen who are working with us. There are a lot of them, and they're trying to coexist. They're trying to look at the non-lethal tools that are available to them. So certainly don't want to categorize everybody just by the industry they work for. But I've known through my career that lethal has always been preferred because it's what daddy, granddaddy, and everybody else did traditionally, culturally. And when you tell somebody we scared the wolves away, it's like, well, what the hell good did that do? They're just over the neighbors. So people love to look in the back of your truck and see a dead coyote or a dead wolf. That's solving a problem. We got something something tangible we can look at. Compensation has been with us since for early recolonization in the mid-'80s. Defenders of Wildlife created a fund, and they were paying for wolf damage and grizzly bear damage, and said they would until wolves were delisted. And so in 2011, they stopped paying in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, I believe 2017. But since then, now you have state funds, we have pass-through federal funding to the states, but there are various forms of compensation, too much to talk about. Does it buy tolerance? I don't believe it does at all. I haven't seen any. Once you start compensating for this, we'll pay you for the confirmed kills. Well, what about the missing? So then there's multiplier factors. We'll pay you for every calf killed, we'll pay you for 5. Well, what about the ones they run to death? What about this? What about that? So I'm not sure you can ever pay enough compensation that people are going to tolerate them. Trust, still got to work at it. Teamwork, I mean, you got to work with ranchers, bring everybody in you can, hunters. I've been a hunter and trapper all my life, but my contribution to wolf recovery is not only being a fed, doing my job, but I'm a lethal weapon. I can kill wolves, I can trap them, I can find them, I can call them. There's a lot of ways that I could be killing a lot of wolves in Idaho. And I vowed decades ago, I'm not killing a wolf for no reason. So that's what I offer as a sportsman. And I know a lot of sportsmen in Montana and Idaho that are hardcore sportsmen, and I ask every time I see somebody, I said, you got a wolf tag? Well, yeah, long one. Are you hunting them? Yeah. I know a lot of retired government trappers. I know some still working with the Wildlife Services. I've called them, I said, you guys kill a wolf yet? No, they're legal. Nah. There's a lot of people that aren't interested in killing them either, but there's thousands who are very willing to if they can get a tag. So judge everybody, I guess, individually on their own merits. So this is really wolf management, in my view, my opinion. Science versus politics. Science recovered them, politics is managing them, killing them. And in college, we learned what biological carrying capacity is. It's how much can live out there with food, water, and habitat. Now we're using social carrying capacity as a measure. How much are people going to put up with? And in our country, people don't want to put up with much at all. I made this one all by myself. Like Dave Meach says, we all got to get in the middle here someday, but so far it's tough to do that. So here's what I tell people on Facebook when everybody's distressed and discouraged and hopeless. I know from being a hunter and a trapper all my life, when it snows and rains, and especially for people using foothold traps, it becomes untenable. The deeper the snow, the better, because then your traps just don't function. And of course, they can go to snaring up there. A lot of people hanging out snares. I'm not gonna go into all the details, but I will tell you, as a trapper my whole life, I've never used snares in my career or as a private person. I've skinned thousands of coyotes for the fur industry back in my day. Snares are an ugly, despicable, damaging, injurious, unforgiving device. And they're setting them out, and you know when you set a snare, they're indiscriminate. You have no idea what's going to walk through them. And I know from talking to certain individuals that snares are taking out deer, and they're taking out elk and moose, livestock, dogs, the list goes on. So, biggest salvation we got is rain and snow, and with climate change, we're not getting as much of that as we could use either. Anyway, I tried to keep this fast short because I hope you got questions and we can talk about Colorado a little more. You first.
So is there a number of tags that are issued through the year, season or whatever?
Unlimited tags, Montana, Idaho. So there's people, I see on Facebook, people say, well, what if I buy 10 of them, will that save 10 wolves? No. Montana, I believe, has a ceiling of 20 wolves that you can kill, but in Idaho, there is no quota, no limit.
I have a couple of ranchers in my family. They're in South Dakota, but I don't know what source they listen to, but one of them talks to me but doesn't want to hear about wolves. The other one says, I know you have a big heart, but your heart is in the wrong road for wolves. And it's like, what are you worried about? You're a small rancher. You have 300 acres. You have 900 acres. And I keep telling them, you know, you go out every day. You're not ever going to have wolves in your area. And I said, you know, I can give you a number. Oh, yeah, we know you have numbers. And it's like, okay, so such fake news.
Yep.
And we have to be able to tell people that. Ranchers, as a whole, the worst ones to be hit are the huge, humongous ranchers that just cut a lot of the tax write-off and they don't have people out there.
Yeah, and then we have the other extreme on that spectrum too, is up in, well, I can talk about like Northeast Washington. You have a lot of ma-pa operations with 100 acres or a couple hundred acres, and they've got 50 cows and 20 sheep or whatever the numbers are, but they're both working. And so a lot of these little places are getting hit because nobody's around, and even people that could watch these small acreages they're working. So vigilance, I didn't get into all the non-lethal today. There's a lot of non-lethal methods, but vigilance and being with your livestock and checking them routinely works. It does work. And I don't have time to go into it, but Lava Lakes Land and Livestock in Idaho, they raise sheep. It's called predator friendly. And they move their herders around, move their camp tender in if they got some wolf activity. They don't have any problem with wolves. And we've got, same way, I've got a guy I co-present with, Joe Engelhardt, out of Calgary, Alberta. He takes care of, for 30 producers, about 4,600 cow-calf pairs. That's a lot of cattle. And we talk weekly, every 2 weeks, probably at the least. And Larkspur kills their cattle, and they lose very few to Larkspur. But wolves, in 2017 or 2018, never lost a single calf out of all those livestock to wolves. He has more grizzly bear problems, actually, than they do wolf. But again, he and his 1 or 2 riders and his wife helps, they check cattle for all these producers. Every 2-3 days, they're out there. They read the livestock's behavior. They can tell if livestock have been, they're unsettled, if they're nervous, they're acting spooky, or there's an actual kill, you know, a lot of times, again, bear kill. they move the cattle, they just shift them. But you can't outrun wolves, but you can certainly take them away from that situation and move them somewhere else, and just that manipulation has kept their losses just minimal. And then there's Hillary Anderson over there out of Yellowstone National Park up in Tom Minor Basin, she and her
Yeah.
husband Andrew, yeah, virtually no problem with predators. But I know other folks, I'm not gonna name names, but there are those who want trouble. They want problems. They want the wolves to keep killing their stock, because all you gotta do up in our country is get on the phone, call Wildlife Services, they confirm it. The airplane or the helicopter's in there, and there's no sparing them anymore. It's none of this incremental. If you wanna shoot the whole pack, do it. Nobody's watching over them. So, again, that's the evolution of wolf killing in our country.
When you say nobody's watching over it,